So I think we have one question to address today, and it's some version of, can entrepreneurship, can the act of being a founder, can it be taught to someone? And I thought, again, I spoke briefly backstage, but rather than kind of go one at a time here, just feel free to just jump in and start off. And we'll try to make sure everybody gets their time to talk, but let's make it interactive and fun and play off each other's thoughts. And otherwise, we could all agree and just walk out. So anyone have an initial thought on answering that question? Go. You're ready. No, you.
All right.
Donna.
Well, I'll take a somewhat controversial position and say that most of it cannot be taught. But what I would say is actually that you can learn things that help you get better in any aspect of entrepreneurship, but no matter what, like building a world-changing business or something that's going to inspire people comes from a place of knowing something really well, or at least being really, really passionate about it. So I would say that entrepreneurship is almost like a layered skill, that you build upon your other strengths. So that's why I encourage people not to focus so much on your desire to be an entrepreneur, but focus on making things and learning how to make things and learning how to do things with other people and sort of, getting into the specifics. And the sort of meta layer of like how to shape that into a business are things that you can learn, but that will be a lot more meaningful once you have some like root basis. So that's why I would say like learning entrepreneurship on its own seems sort of hollow to me. I think it always ties with like core skills or core passions.
I was going to say, I think one of the challenges of trying to learn it before you actually do it is that even if you were an entrepreneur 15 years ago, the circumstances and things that you need to know and do to be successful, a lot of those things are really different now. The environment is different. Just the fundraising environment if today is completely different than it was 15 or 20 years ago. And so if you were trying to learn the ins and outs of raising venture capital, for example, everything you learned in the 90s might be completely irrelevant to learning, to trying to raise money today. Just as one example, the world changes very, very quickly.
But could you teach someone? Do you think you could teach someone?
I actually teach someone, and I think you could. I think that you can express many of the fundamentals, but I think that there's nothing that you can do to make someone become a success. There's no way to engender success as an entrepreneur through education, I think.
Yeah, I think, so I've seen Y Combinator over the last 10 years as a partner as well as like a founder, and they've come pretty close to trying to create a way to systematize it, where they take founders who have shown an ability to make something and spend 3 months working with them, forcing them to write code, get users, and do things. And it's become apparent to me that like there's no case study book that we give them at the start of the program. There's no like curriculum. Like really at the end of the day, we're just really good advisors to call bullshit when they're making up excuses for not getting stuff done or focusing on building the right product. And that's it. So if you can call that education, like maybe that counts as a way to teach it. But so much of the stuff we do really at the end of the day is just being good advisors and focusing them to get back on doing things, to get back on making things.
Ed, do you want to weigh in?
Well, I'm sitting here listening to this, and since this is one of the things that I try to teach, it seems interesting.
I thought you might have an opinion.
To work this out, look, can you teach entrepreneurship? Well, to some people you can, and to some people you can't. You can't teach someone to have passion for something. You can't teach someone, I don't think, after a certain point, kind of life skills, get your stuff done on time, that kind of stuff. Right, which is a lot of it. There is a body of knowledge, and there is not only a body of knowledge in entrepreneurship, there's a knowing how. There's knowing that things are the case, the body of knowledge, and there's knowing how to do stuff. And the knowing how to do stuff is incredibly important. But we teach knowing how in lots of ways. Doctors, architects.
Well, you have to be lucky too. You don't have to know how, you just have to know something and meet someone else who knows the rest. Like, I really feel like it's trial by error. I'm only speaking from my own personal experience. I didn't know shit about fashion. I'd never worked in fashion. I'd never run a company. I didn't know business accounting, and luckily I work with an amazing accountant now, and luckily I hire people who went to fashion school. I just know like what I personally love to do, and that's work with my hands. And so I think trial by error, for me, entrepreneurship means like answering your emails, meeting your deadlines, like, you know, making sure shit's just moving along and doing, like, reaching your goals. I don't know.
Well, I think it's not that you can't do this if you haven't been taught the skills. Of course you can. And if you're taught the skills, are you going to be successful? I think the answer to that is not necessarily. But the question is, can you teach people some of the skills? I think the answer to that's obviously yes, you can. Implicit in what you were saying, and certainly by saying, just should you teach this? You know, should you teach this to graduates? So your 18 or 19-year-old comes to you and says, Dad, I'm going to drop out to start a record business. You know,
Bad
what do you
idea.
say?
Yeah, I would say having done that. I would
Dad.
recommend this.
It's my dream.
You know, what do you say?
Well, so I'm sitting here thinking about the analogy to cooking, right? Like, I like to cook, but I have to follow a recipe, right? I'm in that sort of middle of the pack where I'm decent at it, but I can't look at a pantry full of things and imagine a gourmet meal, right? I know people who can. They're on the upper end of the bell curve. I also know people who, with all the ingredients and the recipe, still make a mess of things, right? So I think entrepreneurship is the same. I think it is, yes, sometimes, right? There's just a character of, some people want structure, they want things to be defined, they like them in a box. That isn't entrepreneurship, and that's okay, right? So there's a certain set of people that are just, it's not gonna be for them. Then there's the people on the upper end of the curve that they don't need me to teach it, they're gonna figure it out. My guess is we've got some of those people like that on the panel today, right? And we have people like that in our community that I'm not gonna teach them anything. They're just gonna go and make it happen, they're never gonna fail. And then there's a bunch of people in the middle who need the training, they need to be surrounded by people who know the rest, and they could go either way, right, depending on how well they absorb the material, and potentially they have to take a couple turns at it to practice it, to get it right, because they know the pieces and parts, they just don't know how to put it together, right, and that you learn through experience.
I think that those are all good points. I think in entertainment, it's a little bit different because there's no middle. It's like you're shit or you're it. And some of the most talented people I've ever seen are washing dishes because they haven't had the opportunity and luck. They haven't been in the right place at the right time with the right thing, or they, simply had it stolen from them or whatever. But they have no plan B. I mean, oftentimes, you look at, you talk about entrepreneurship and entertainment, whether it's an athlete, it's a movie actor, it's a singer. Oftentimes these people are pretty twisted and broken in a lot of ways. I mean, no disrespect to any of them, but if you sit in your driveway and you shoot hoops for 8 hours a day from when you're 5 to when you're 20, and you do pretty much nothing else, chances are you'll be really good in the NBA and you'll win the game and all that and make a lot of money, but you may not know how to make friends or balance your checkbook or tie your shoes or that type of thing. And so you're hopefully surrounded by good people that help you and support you business-wise. And then there's the other end of it, which is the other 99.99999% who, that's what they did and they can't function often. So I don't mean to be so dark about this, but I think that I don't know where I'm going with this, but
Okay.
but the whole idea
All right.
is
Well,
that,
let's go.
I think that there's a lot of, in all these things with entrepreneurship, a lot of times you just have to have such a passion that you don't have a plan B. There isn't, it's like, well, if this doesn't work out, my dad will send me to law school or something like that. It's like, if this doesn't work out, you're washing dishes or something. Right. So that drives you a lot, and then you have to make it. So I think there's a lot of that involved too.
Becca, let me ask you, because I loved your talk earlier, and I thought in some ways, what question could be asked, how do you discover that this is who you are, right? That this that you can do this. It seemed like you took some risks and got there, but talk a little bit about that. It's like, how did this, you didn't, I mean, I don't know, but I'm presuming you didn't, like, you don't feel like you were a born entrepreneur. It's something you discovered somehow.
Yeah, I really feel like I was maybe a special case or some kind of case where it happened so organically. I didn't know I actually had that vision. I just knew that I enjoyed doing this thing. I guess for me, never having the goal to be an entrepreneur, never having the goal to be a fashion designer, I guess my advice for those people is just like to keep your day job and have a lot of cool hobbies, and then like spend your time doing those hobbies, and then the hobby might just snowball. That's what happened for me. So I don't know, I got so many lucky breaks. I met someone in New York who represented me sales-wise, like, I don't know, celebrities just randomly bought my stuff in stores. Those kind of things, like, you definitely can't teach and you definitely can't quantify.
Ed, is there an argument we should be teaching this, partially because students don't know whether they are, if this is right for them, if they're sort of thinking that their only opportunity in life is to get a job and to kind of fit in somewhere.
Do you think that's about confidence, though? I mean, do you think that maybe they just need encouragement to, like, follow the things that they're truly passionate about and good at, and maybe they haven't had exposure to people doing things in the field, or maybe, like, they're in, I don't know, some kind of path that someone else has set for them, or I think encouragement would help.
Yeah, I actually think that's really important is, being a founder and starting your own thing has to be something that can be modeled to you, that you can see. And so whether we define that as teaching or not, I mean, that just ends up being sort of a semantic issue. But I think that if you don't have examples in your own life that you can look up to and say, that's somebody that I want to be like, or that path that I can follow, you're not going to even imagine that it's something that you can do. And I think that that's, whether it's to start a company or to be a doctor or go to college or whatever. I mean, if your world doesn't have people that are doing those things, it's very difficult. And I think that having access to those networks is really important. I think one of the things that Y Combinator does, which is really important, is actually gives people who are outside of that network in Silicon Valley a way to get inside of it very quickly. And they have to sink or swim and prove that they have something that they can build and grow. But the point is, it short circuits things and gives people that opportunity, and I think that's a really key part of this.
Such a great point, because when you think back to, even 8-10 years ago, it literally was who you had in your personal orbit and whether anybody was modeling it for you. Today we have events like this and successful entrepreneurs sharing the good, the bad, the ugly, and how did I do it, and you've got co-working spaces and incubators and accelerator programs that are actually modeling those behaviors. So it is less about whether you happen to know the right people. There are a lot more opportunities to be surrounding yourself with people who can model the behaviors.
I guess the question I directing at Ed was a little bit like, we have some, we talked about it in an earlier panel of we want a more inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystem. We want to reach people who don't grow up with great role models in this area. So, does school have some important role to play in this?
Well, I think what you said is important. The most important thing for the people I know that have started businesses, and I've been lucky to know a lot that started them, that grew and became very big, is they're on fire about something. They absolutely have a passion. That's what they've said. There's not a plan B here. It's something I've got to do. I think that what we ought to do is not screw people up from being entrepreneurs by telling them they've got to have this career path or that career path, or go get this job or go get that job. I remember a kid, I was teaching at Wharton at the time. Kid comes to me as a senior, and he says, I've got a job with XYZ, I think it was accounting or consulting firm, and I've gotten my degree, and I don't really want to be an accountant or consultant or whatever it was. What should I do? And I gave him the advice. I'm sure his parents would have had me fired if they knew. I said, don't spend a day doing it. Figure out what you got passion to do. Life is short. Entrepreneurs act on their passion. Can you teach them some stuff so that they're more likely to be successful? I think yes, but it's very hard to teach the passion. What you can do is you can encourage, as you said, you can encourage people to follow their hearts, to do something that matters. And what we ought to do is stop discouraging people from doing that. That's the thing that really
Right on.
makes me
I think one thing that we can teach that I would like to see us teaching more at all different levels is, whether through instructions or just like cultural change, is resilience. Because that's something, I mean, I totally understand the sentiment of there being no plan B, and it's something that psychologically is really good to have. But I would also say the counter argument to that that's also true is that entrepreneurs never actually just have like one shot, right? Like, you're always, whether it's, plan A is iterating your product and you're always changing, it's your ability to never be perfect and to keep going all the time that I think is actually very counter to how a lot of our formal academic environments kind of bring us up to kind of achieve exactly what somebody else has laid out for us. So, I mean, that's something that I would like to see more in schools.
Yeah, I really feel that way. I mean, when I talk to some of my friends with jobs, I feel like I have a higher pain threshold. Like, I don't care if I'm overdrafting in all my accounts because I know in 2 weeks I won't be, and like, that doesn't bother me the way it bothers some people. They're like, fuck, I'm overdrafted, like, I have to get a job now, like, this is over. Like that kind of thing. I know business, like cash flow ebbs and flows, business ebbs and flows, and you really have to like be strong and have that high pain threshold to be like, I'm gonna continue to do this even though it sucks right now.
Yeah, and we have a system, I'm no expert on the education system, but we have a system that was designed for a really different society, where failure is literally not an option. Right? If you aren't putting the right peg in the right hole consistently, like, you are failing. And I wish we had more kids growing up, especially in cities, who saw this opportunity and who were given a chance to have it. But it's so damn hard because we have these systems that are just fundamentally, I mean, they feel like prisons. I don't want to go on a polemic. But how do you expect any kid to feel like they can be something else other than, say, an athlete or a musician when the systems they go into are essentially setting them up for failure? I would love to get that kind of passion and that excitement, and we see it starting. We actually had 2 interesting companies this last batch of Y Combinator. One is delivering weed to California, and the other is started by a founder who was doing that 10 years ago. The problem was, well, he got arrested for it. But he was ahead of his time, and ahead of a lot of stupid, or at least seeing the stupidity in a few drug laws. But here's the thing: he's in the batch right now. He served time for that. He's a convicted felon, and well, I mean, that's our absurd drug laws at work for you. But the startup that he started, one that serves America's prison population, which is a non-trivial one. And it's a simple process that allows them to easily communicate with their loved ones while they're inside prison. Now, I don't think, notwithstanding some convicted felons in here, many of you would have thought up that idea. But he's probably going to make a lot of money with this business. And it's a shame that he had to go through what he had to go through. But here is what happens when we see opportunity and serendipity work out. But for every one example like him, there are thousands or tens of hundreds of thousands who aren't. But that's just opportunity we miss out on. So that just gets back to why this is so important, because I just want better stuff in this world, and we're missing out on a lot of great stuff.
I think part of it too is what people see for themselves as being success. Is it a lot of money, or is it you're getting to do what you like to do and you're happy in your life and you have a job that you like? I mean, those, like you were saying, if you've got a passion to find your passion is just, hopefully everybody in this room is lucky enough to find what their passion is, like I have, like everybody else up here has, because it makes all the difference in the world in how you live your life, and it's a huge, huge thing. So, but to me, that's success. I don't need to, promote all the shows in town and own all the venues and all that type of stuff. I don't think I'd be happy doing that.
Could one of you give an example of someone either that you thought was a good entrepreneur and wasn't? I don't need their names, or that you didn't think they were a good entrepreneur. It turned out that they were good. It gets to a little bit the challenge. We don't always know who's good at this. Even we might think they have it or they don't. Any sort of examples come to mind?
Kim Kardashian, she does not get enough credit. She's running an empire and people discredit her because she's reality TV.
Right.
I don't know, I just think that's genius. Like, you can be famous because you're on TV, but she's continued to like build that, and so she has stores and all the other stuff, and
Right.
I mean, it does take brains to do that.
Yep. Very good. Peter, any thoughts?
That's a good question. I mean, I've certainly seen people who look really great on paper, right? They exhibit all the traits of a great entrepreneur, right? I think actually was Paul Graham said he could be fooled by anybody who looked like Mark Zuckerberg, right? I mean, it's out of context what I'm saying, but there is this sort of stereotype, right? That's in the media, and I think that we all know that it's not true. I think everyone here on stage is, in large part disproves that stereotype. But I think I have seen founders who they play the part, right? And they go to the events and they, have the hot startup, and it turns out that, there was something fundamentally flawed about the product or their management style, and even though they'd raised millions of dollars, they weren't able to either sustain the success because the market changed, or their product just wasn't good in the first place. And I think that it's really easy for us to see some of those external trappings, like, they raised money. Raising money isn't a sign of success. It actually, if anything, places and it just raises the bar for success even higher. And it doesn't mean that raising money is a bad thing. I've done it and had it work out. But I think that we can't get confused with being on TechCrunch and raising money and being at the right conferences for actually building a successful business.
Yeah. Right.
No, I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, sort of back to the bell curve analogy, there's a whole cluster of entrepreneurs in the middle, and you just don't know until you watch them execute who's going to go one way or the other. I mean, we had right after 1776 opened 2 years ago, there was a woman entrepreneur who came to me to do office hours and talk about her business model. After spending about an hour together, I made a mental note to myself that there was no way this woman was going to be successful, right? But as I watched her execute over the last, literally 2 years, she has systematically taken all the feedback that she's been given. She has iterated and pivoted around her business. She's maintained a passion about the core issue that she's fundamentally trying to tackle. And she has wisely brought on smart people to complement the things that she learned she didn't know how to do or didn't like to do. And she has just raised a major round of funding to help her execute as she's gotten major contracts. I mean, it's just really been incredible to watch her grow. And she, I think, is a great example of the teaching, right? Like, she's taken advantage of all the resources in front of her on the buffet and consumed them and wisely known how to put them together to execute. Whereas I've watched lots and lots of other members have access to the exact same buffet and not know what to do with it.
That's interesting, yeah. Let me ask you I don't know how many of you have children, but is this something, when you think about your own children, how would you engender this in them and foster it? And again, how have you thought about that? I think in some ways, this is an observation a little bit from the make side, is there's a lot of people in the science and technology community that actually don't know how they got there. Like, what was it that actually stirred the passion that got all those hours to do this? And then they have kids and they're kind of scratching their head and say, well, how did I get here? And what can I do with my own kids? But I'm just curious if you've ever thought about how this might be very personal to you.
I don't have I have a fur baby, my cat, but I hope to have kids one day.
You should pick up.
Cats are the
Terrible
entrepreneurial
founder.
symbol. They're in it for themselves.
But I think I got a lot of advantages growing up, but the biggest was two parents who just indulged whatever thing I wanted to do. If I wanted to paint, they signed me up for the painting class. They got me the stuff. If I wanted to learn how to code, they spent a lot of money to get me my first PC. So I would hope that my son or daughter, if they showed any interest in anything, I would try as hard as I could to support it. And I know that's I guess that's one-on-one parenting stuff.
but I know how much better off I am because of it.
I have a 5-year-old. I think about this all the time, right? Because we're looking at the whole public school, private school, what do you do to get your child educated? And he's getting ready to enter an educational system that is basically structured to teach him how to follow directions, right? And that is not the world that he lives in or he's going to live in when he grows up. So, I think all of the things that were just said, exposing him to alternative environments and rewarding that behavior that isn't just because I told you to do it, you did it, but it's that independent thinking and self-directedness. Because if he gets that, he'll figure out everything else.
That's great. Peter, did you have a thought on it?
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of kids, and I'm disappointed that they haven't raised any money for their startups yet. But I'm like, guys, it's a great market right now. A lot of liquidity out there. 2 and 6. So I know it's like, come on, guys. Yeah. I think that I want to equip them with the skills. I think that I was exposed to computers pretty early on. My dad was a consumer electronics enthusiast, and always had we had a PC in the house pretty early and got to play around with that and become familiar with it. I don't worry about them being exposed to enough technology these days. In fact, the opposite. They're in a school that is very really discourages screen time. But the thing that I try to keep in mind is that the thing that I do didn't exist when I was a kid. And that I assume that that's a real strong possibility for my kids. So trying to guide them in a specific direction, I think, is probably a bad idea. My dad was a doctor, and I think he really wanted me to be a doctor, but he didn't try to really force it on me. But I do think that, encouraging your kids to find things that they're excited about, and I think it actually doesn't even matter what it is. I think that it's just good to let them be excited about things and to know what that feeling is and to know how to respond to it and to know what it's like to get really passionate about something. Because I know when I was a kid, I got really obsessed with things. I was really obsessed with Robotech when I was 10. And I actually kept I would watch the show every day and take notes as a 9-year-old, 10-year-old. And I realized when I became a blogger, I was really well suited for obsessively trying to catalog things. And I realized that kind of feeling ran throughout my life. And so I want my kids to be able to always be able to tap into that feeling of being excited about something, whatever it is. I don't even care what it is.
So I have 3 kids, and 2 of them are entrepreneurs. One is a musician and started a record label, and the other is an artist and practices her art on people's bodies. And they are entrepreneurs because they simply follow their passion. I remember when Ben announced he was going to apply to one school. Now, for a college professor's kid to say, I'm going to apply to one school, and it's the one school his dad didn't know anyone at. There's a place called the Berklee School of Music in Boston, And I said, well, what are you going to do if you don't get in? He said, I'm going to figure out why and reapply next year. All right? He had passion for what he was doing. And my daughter, who's the artist, had a similar passion. And that led to them trying to figure out, how the hell am I going to support myself in doing that? What kinds of things do I have to do? What kinds of businesses, do I have to start? I think the other thing is we've had a saying in our family for a long time. If you can't deal with the feedback, don't ask for it. And this idea of getting feedback when you're an entrepreneur and being open to dealing with critique and criticism turns out to be a really central idea here. And a lot of people can't deal with it, They're used to everybody getting a trophy. And if you can't deal with feedback and critique, whether it's from customers or employees or the people with money or whatever it is, your business probably isn't going to be successful.
Yeah, if you don't get the feedback from your friends, you're going to get it from the market, and you might not like what they say.
I did want to add just one more story. I don't have children yet, but I hope to someday. And I grew up, something that I learned a lot from was being a Girl Scout everywhere I went. So my father was a Marine, and we moved around a lot. I was in 10 different Girl Scout troops in different states, different cities all across the U.S. But I learned, my parents never let me quit. I think many people who were in some sort of scouting kind of hit the point where like it wasn't fun anymore or it wasn't cool, and my parents just were not having it. They did not care if I didn't think it was cool. I was a Girl Scout until my senior year of high school, at which point I became a lifetime Girl Scout, and just having that like consistency and having to like show up and just make the best of that situation, whether I got along with people, you know, in that city or whatever, I think was really, you know, they didn't do it to make me an entrepreneur, but it was one of those skills that, you know, I still have now.
The cookies.
I also, this is ultimately, I didn't see it as entrepreneurship at the time, but I did immediately hack the sort of business model for cookies. I found out how much money our troop made by selling a box of cookies, and when people didn't want to buy, I would ask them for a donation that was worth more than what we got from selling a cookie box.
What merit badge? What merit badge does that get you?
Mark Hustler.
That means that you're like,
That's
your
what that
camps
is.
are underfunded when you do
I like
that.
that.
Now I understand the model, and I realize the shortcut that I did not understand at the time. But that was really big for me. So I would almost offer that as like a counterpoint to like being able to follow whatever passion is obviously great. But for me, not being able to follow my passion in some ways was good. I just had to stick with it whether I liked it or not.
Yeah. You know, the proverbial lemonade stand kind of thing. So, a young mother actually wrote me, she reads our magazine, said her daughter was looking for a science fair project, you know, found our magazine, found something in it. It was kind of like building a satellite, setting up near space. And she told her daughter she couldn't afford the materials for the project to do it. She said they're a military family, they didn't have the money to do it. The daughter said, I'll run a Kickstarter. And, you know, and she ran a Kickstarter, raised $500. And the mother said, you know, I said yes to her thinking she's going to fail at this, but it's a good lesson anyway. But she didn't. And kind of remarkable. There's something about really early on getting cash money for something really kind of, at least for me, it sort of caught my eye, you know.
We made my son he got a peddler's license and stood down here in the downtown mall and sold Beanie Babies in the craze. Yeah. Now what he was 11, and what no one knew was he was buying them at Hallmark for 12 and selling them for 15 on the downtown mall. So.
Yeah, my 5-year-old at a big, huge event, we ended up not having a sitter, so my husband and I brought him along. And at the time he was 4, and one of the startups that was there, their mascot was a pig. So they had these cute little tiny plastic pigs that they were giving out. And so my son got, you know, probably 10 or 20 that she gave him. And he went off to play with one of the other older kids that were there. It kind of looks like that, yeah. Don't let my kid get at it, because what he did was he went and sold them. And when he came back, I'm like, oh, what happened to your pigs? And he reached in his pocket and he pulled out money. And I realized my 4-year-old had sold his pigs for money. So I'm like, that is my boy right there.
Very good.
And let's get some more pigs.
Well, we have just a couple minutes left here. You know, I would guess that we don't have quite a yes or no answer to the question, and it may not really matter that we do. But let me just, does anybody have any kind of closing remark or a final thought that they didn't get out earlier? You're all content. Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank the panelists, the super panel. I will add this, that, you know, it's better if you believe you can learn to be an entrepreneur than believing otherwise. So, you know, you have to try, you have to do things, and that word used and others' encouragement from the community and from others really matters a lot. So thank you very much. Thank you.